So you want to make sure that from a quality standpoint, as teams are, building quickly and getting features out the door, that they're actually taking the time to make sure that they're going through the proper testing processes, and making sure that the code that they're actually deploying is actually worth deploying, right? So that if it goes out and it doesn't break anything that may already exist, right? Causing either the feature to be rolled back or the whole application to go down, which just makes users angry, right? And then from a velocity standpoint, there's always a goal to get stuff out the door quicker, particularly since users today really demand that. But you want to make sure that if when you're looking at the process, if there are any manual whole handoffs, that maybe you can automate those. But you always want to constantly look at your software delivery process and figure out where you can improve it, where you can optimize it, so that you're increasing velocity without putting a burden on your development team. And automation is a great way of doing that. And then lastly, collaboration, right? When you look at teams today, particularly in our, I guess, maybe post-pandemic world, developers and DevOps teams are situated not only all over the world today, but there are a lot of folks are working at their house or at home office, so they're not really together. So that makes collaboration a little more difficult. So making sure that those teams between developers and DevOps and Scrum and ops teams can actually collaborate better and work closer together means that you'll not only deliver faster, but you'll deliver higher quality software at a great rate. All right. So those are kind of the big challenges that are faced today by software companies. And we know that software companies who are doing it well are successful, right? And we know that just through DORA, right? The DevOps Institute and their assessment report. They've been doing this for about 6 years now. These figures come from the last report in 2021. So we know that high performing software delivery teams are deploying over 900 times faster, right? We know that their lead time is 6,500 times faster. And then when it comes to a quality standpoint, they're recovering from incidents 6,500 times faster. But also when they deploy things, those deployments are breaking changes 3 times lower, right? So, and I'm not saying that every company or every software team should strive for these numbers or even strive to be an elite performer, but it's really about understanding how the teams are working today, right? What's the baseline from a velocity and quality standpoint using DORA metrics? And then how do you track those metrics over time to see if you're improving and reaching to and striving for the point where you want to be as a DevOps team or a development team to get to there. And maybe half of these numbers mean that for your team, you're doing really well, right? But the thing here is just understand those numbers, find a way to get those numbers and get those benchmarks, and then see where you want to go from an improvement standpoint and strive to get there. So, but we also know software development in general is really complicated, right? And it's fragmented. There are a lot of different teams and groups doing a lot of different things with a lot of different tools. And that really leads to siloed data. So it becomes really hard to actually pull together meaningful data and the right data so that you can get those metrics and analytics to understand how you're performing from a software development perspective. Right. So we know that teams are building software differently in the same organization. As I mentioned, the tool chain is fragmented with data silos because of the different processes and the siloed data. That just means that teams have a hard time working together, right? Because they're not seeing the same thing or doing the same thing. And that leads to a lack of visibility in their software delivery life cycle, right? And it can cause bottlenecks and blockages that inhibit productivity. And I know I've talked to big companies that have tried to build these metrics in-house, and they can do it. It's just really hard, right? It's a big lift. It takes resources and time and effort to not only build it out, but then to maintain it. And then if you add a new tool to that data pool, now you've got to go back and see, did adding that new tool break anything else? And how do I get that new data into this existing algorithms so I can get the right metrics? But we have an answer for that, right? And within Sumo Logic, last year we came out with software development optimization, and it's a platform. It's a SaaS platform. And the nice thing is it brings in all that disparate data from the different tools in the tool chain. But it's data from tools that we know developers like to use, right? And there's nothing more important than letting developers use the tools they love. And we can do that. We can let you do that while bringing in all that different data, bringing it together, correlating it, and presenting it into metrics and analytics that make sense for what you're trying to do, right? So now you can understand how you're doing from a velocity standpoint across teams. You can understand how you're doing from a quality and reliability standpoint, but also security. And then being able to see the same data in metrics and analytics in one place on one platform means that now different teams across the organization can actually collaborate better because they're seeing the same information. So let's get into the demo. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you is just the DORA metrics overview. And again, this is an overview across all the teams within the organization. And again, we break it up into the 4 main categories of the DORA metrics. It is velocity, so deployment frequency, lead time for changes, right? So that's your velocity category. And then your change failure rate and your mean time to restore or time to restore service, which is your quality metrics, right? And you can see how, again, across all the teams, how they're doing from an aggregate perspective. From a deploys, the time it takes for lead time for changes, your percentage of change failure rate, and then the time it takes to restore any service from any outages, right? So 0.5, 30 minutes. And this is all Sumo Logic demo data right now, just as a side reference. In your pipeline overview, this actually takes you one level deeper into your actual pipelines, right? I've talked to a lot of people where, hey, it's great to see the DORA metrics as an aggregate, as a whole, but I need that one level deeper into what's actually happening into my pipelines and where things are going well, where things might not be going so well, where builds are breaking, where things are getting held up, because that slows me down. And if it's something I can do about it quickly, then I want to know about it. So when you look at just the pipeline execution, this is a trend over time. And again, you can see this is within a 24-hour period. But you can see our execution trends over time. And then within the last 24 hours, what's happened in those pipelines with different services or alerts for different services. So you see the top 10 critical alerts, and you'll see deploys, and you'll actually see how many failed versus were successful. Of the failed deploys, what were the last 10 failed deploys, and what were they? What environment? And then from a builds perspective, right? I want to know how my builds are doing. What if there seems to be a large percentage of builds breaking? I need to understand why. Maybe the CI/CD platform is down. Maybe the build was too large to begin with, and I need to break it up in pieces. But again, these are things that having this visibility lets me take action and empowers me to actually go find out if something's wrong, and then go do something about it to keep work flowing, right? Because the last thing you want is work stopped and developers being idle, right? Because then they'll start figuring out their own things to do. But from a build status, you'll see how many builds failed, how many were aborted, unstable, and successful. and you'll see the last 10 builds that failed. And then if you click into the build, this will take you right to the GitHub, to the PR. So you can get further detail if you need to. From a pull request standpoint, you can see how many pull requests were created versus merged. And then the top 10 PRs by time to close. And this is, I think this is important, right? Because what you don't want is a PR sitting around for too long. Because what that does is, it creates bottlenecks and blockages. It slows things down. It slows the team down, but not only that, but then it slows the next team down who might be waiting for that work to be completed. So having some visibility into the pull requests and what's happening with them lets you understand if there's an action you may need to take. Talk to a particular developer or set of developers and find out, hey, why has this PR been sitting here for so long? It needs to be merged, reviewed, and merged. So can you do that, please? And maybe you'll find out that there's something else wrong with it, right? And it needs to go back to team. And then from an issues perspective, within the pipeline itself, right? So how many to do, how many were completed, and then how many issues were done, the last 10 critical issues. If you click into the issue, you'll go to your Jira ticket, which I don't have set up. And then from an issue trend, you'll actually be able to see the top issues that took the longest to close, right? And you can actually go to, again, the Jira ticket if you wanted to. Okay, that's the pipeline overview. And then I'm going to do a little deeper dive into the door metrics and the CI/CD pipeline monitoring. But first, before I get into, we'll start with deployment frequency. And so this gives you a one-click down just in your deployment frequency. You can see deploys over time. You can see deploys by repo and a one-week comparison of what's failed and what's successful and the environment name. You can see successful versus failed deployments. And it, again, just gives you an idea of how smooth or not so smooth your software delivery process is. Again, you're seeing spikes here. And this may prompt you to find out why. It's possible that people are on vacation and things slow down. Could be that some of the applications broke within the CI/CD platform. Who knows? But again, just having this visibility gives you an idea of how your teams are performing, and if there are any areas of improvement that you can do, right, to make it better. From a lead time perspective, we have your definitions of, again, this is for Sumo, what denotes an elite, high, medium, and low performer from a lead time perspective, your minimum lead time, your average, your medium, and your max. You can see how from our max, we're low, but from an average time frame, we're relatively high performance, that is. You can actually see which service is doing better than others from a lead time perspective. Loyalty engine's taking an awful long time. And so you may want to look at that service and who's responsible for that service versus the others. Again, because they could be slowing down. And then you can also see by team, right? So you can see the app dev team has a longer lead time than the others. Again, it could be for this 14-day period that they had people on a vacation, could be something else, could be new developers or new engineers that join the team. So there's a ramp up perspective. But again, this may prompt you to want to look at what's happening within that team to see if you can lower that lead time a bit and maybe get more in line with the averages here. The other thing you can start doing is looking at repos with the slowest time, right? So again, payment had an average lead time of 90 hours versus all the others, right? I don't know if that's an issue. It could be for a particular team or not. But again, having this visibility, that one click or two clicks down into, what's going on helps just with incremental improvements to your process that increases your velocity and your quality of the software that's being deployed. in interest of time. So let's go to the quality piece. So on change failure rate, you can see that we at Sumo have an 8.6% change failure, which isn't bad, right? We can see the top services with a P1 incident and the number of incidents. And we can also see the top 5 alerting services in a weekly comparison, right? So we can see that, mobile app had 9 incidents versus 3 a week ago. Again, why did that spike? I don't know, but it's something that you can look into. And then your average change failure rate trend, you can see we had a nice decline from February 11th to about the 16th, and then there's a little bit of a incline, but not too bad. But it's not too bad, okay? But again, what caused this spike here is something you may want to look into. And then from a time to restore is about just under 30 minutes, right? Which isn't too bad. And then you can actually see the P1 instance by service name, right? And if you can actually filter, and you can see that the DB engine had quite the spike. Actually, two decent spikes. So again, something you may want to look at that service and the team responsible for that service, and address any issues that might be popping up to smooth this line out a bit. All right, and then this is the one. This development delivery times dashboard is new. We just GA'd this probably about 2 weeks ago, and this really gives you team level information. So here, from an overview across the teams, you can see your active development time. So the time it takes to develop actual code and software, and the average time to review and merge code, and the average time to deploy by environment. Okay. Again, you can see a spike in the production, something you may want to take a look at. But by now you can start diving into how they're doing from a team perspective, the average development time by team. So look at the Quesmo team versus the Ben team versus the Espatal team. Pretty even across those teams, which is great. And then average time for deployment. Again, having these detailed views by team gives you an idea. If you look at the tool SRE team and the security team and the DevOps team versus the analytics team, the analytics team is taking almost 3 or 4 times longer for development versus security and SRE. Again, most probably because their coding is much more complicated, but it may prompt you, if you don't know, it may prompt you to take a look into what's going on there. And then you can see weekly average lead time by team, which is interesting, right? Because now you can start seeing as, if one team is experiencing a long lead time and other teams are dependent on that first team for work to be brought over, completed and brought over, if that first team's lead time is increasing, it could be a domino effect for the lead time for the other teams that are dependent. And you want to nip that in the bud sooner versus later, because that'll help bring your lead times down to a more acceptable level, right? Because we know today within an organization, there are small pockets of dev teams doing different things within a microservices environment and modern applications and small batch development. And, as that team completes work and passes that work over to the next team that do their thing, if anything's holding up that first team, it's going to hold up everybody else down the line, slowing you down. And then you can also look by service, right? You can see the average development time by service and the average time for deployment by that service. And you can feel free to put questions in the chat or in the QA, which I can get to, either at the end or as we're talking here. Okay, great. So I'm just going to hit it. What time is it? All right. So I'm just going to hit on a few dashboards here on the CI/CD pipeline. So the alerts, right? You always want to know what's going on in your pipeline. You want to know if there are issues slowing you down, builds are breaking, the pipeline's down. So here you can see alerts by priority. You can see the alerts by service. right? So look, a recommendation engine has a lot in the last 24 hours, which is really interesting. And then the teams responsible, right? So you can see, the app dev team at 18, it's not too bad. But again, some of these may be more high priority than others. And having this visibility and having this, these analytics gives you and empowers you to do things and take action to fix things quickly before anything affects either your developers and your development time or the users who are using your application. And if something gets deployed that shouldn't have been deployed and it breaks the application, causing a bad user experience and then possible brand erosion. And then you get a list here of high priority alerts, right? In the day and time, the service, the team responsible, and the priority. And if you go to alert ID, and I don't have that set up either, but that's PagerDuty. That'll take you to your PagerDuty ticket. And then from your alerts created versus closed, you can see how they're trending. Looks pretty smooth to me. And then high priority alerts by service, right? And again, you can see your DB engine kind of mimics what we saw before, and with some high spikes here. Okay. On your builds, this tells you exactly what's happening within your CI and CD in your builds and your pipelines, right? So you've got 5,300 builds. You can see how the status of those builds, what's failed, what's successful. You got 2,400 failed builds here. Something's probably going on, plus another 1,100 that were aborted. I don't feel that's not that great, because it's over almost 70%, right? Of your builds are either failed or aborted. That's slowing things down. There's got to be a reason for it. And then this, again, pick up the phone, send an email, send a Slack, figure out what's going on and fix it so that work can keep moving forward. You can see the number of builds by service and by team. And then you can see a kind of a graph of your builds versus your successes versus failures. And again, you've got a higher failure rate than your successful rate. So again, something that you may want to take a look at. And then you can dig in a little further, right? So you see what's happening here. You go down, you can see your last failed builds, and then click into your build. That'll bring you into your CI build or pipeline, and then you can see what's going on there. You can also look at your last 10 successful builds and why they were successful versus why the other builds failed. Could be size, could be time, what have you. Pipeline stage monitoring, again, gives you an idea of the different stages in your pipeline and how they're being executed. So you'll see a count of the stage execution, the number, what failed. And then you can, and in a lot of these, if you click on any of the graphs, you can go right to the error logs or all the logs and figure out what's going on. And then you can also see your top 20 slowest pipeline stages by pipeline runs. And your pipeline summary and your 10 failed stages, last 10. And then lastly, I'll just hit on the pull request because we got 4 minutes left. Again, you can see all of the PRs that were created and merged, the top 10 services by PRs and what the status is. You can also look at pull request by target branch, which is all master here. You can see created versus merged versus declined. Okay, so you've got a lot of created PRs and there's a big gap here, right? So again, why is it taking so long? Why did it take almost 7 days or a week for some of these PRs to get closed? And again, it all depends on what your threshold is. It can be 24 hours. It can be 10 days, whatever. But again, the way you set this up just gives you that extra layer of visibility to understand how your team is doing, where things are being held up, why are they being held up, and then how can you fix them so that work continues to flow and you're deploying high quality software quickly out to your customers. All right, so that's it for the demo. I'm just going to see there's nothing in the chat and don't see any questions yet. Okay. So our Dan, Scott, William, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, I can hang on for the next couple of minutes. Feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to, if you can come off mute, go ahead and say it. Otherwise, you have a great day. Thanks.